Welcome back to Revise and Resubmit, Weekend Book Review. This week, we're going deep on the life of Lee Miller. Model muse, photographer, war correspondent. She was kind of all over the place.
It's hard to even put her in a box,
Exactly. And to try to understand her, we've got Antony Penrose's biography, The Lives of Lee Miller. He was her son.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and we're pairing that with the Sky original film, Lee Miller, The True Story, starring the amazing Kate Winslet.
Oh, I love her. She's so good.
Isn't she? So it's not just like your average biopic. We're really trying to get into, what made Lee Miller tick, what drove her. Both the artistic side and those choices that made her life so unusual, let's just say.
Yeah, well, I think what's so interesting is, like you said, she was a fashion model and a world-traveling artist, but it doesn't start that way,
Not at all. Penrose really goes into detail about her father, Theodore.
Right.
Classic American self-made man story. Started with nothing, ended up a successful inventor. Even this crazy story about him introducing skiing to Poughkeepsie.
Wait, really?
Yeah. Brought skis back from Europe and was like gliding down hills in Poughkeepsie. I can only imagine what people thought.
They must have been like, what is this guy doing?
Totally. But it speaks to that adventurous spirit that Lee definitely got from him.
Absolutely.
And it wasn't just adventure. He was obsessed with understanding how things worked. Penrose talks about his insatiable curiosity, always asking why. You can see how that could shape a young Lee.
Yeah.
Make her super independent and ready to kind of break the rules.
Yeah, and you see that throughout her life for sure.
But then, alongside this upbringing, there's this really dark part of her childhood. The sexual assault when she was 7 years old and then getting a venereal disease. It's just awful.
It's just horrific. And to think about how that impacts a person for the rest of their life.
And then on top of that, the advice she gets from a psychiatrist to separate sex and love. It just makes you wonder how that, plus the death of her first love, influenced her relationships later on and her choices.
Oh, absolutely. There's just so much complexity there. It's like trying to piece together a puzzle where some pieces are missing,
Yeah. You can try to understand, but those early traumas, they're just there.
They're always there.
It's just heartbreaking. But it also makes her even more amazing. Because out of all that darkness, she comes out as this brilliant artist. Penrose describes her escape to Paris in the 1920s. Can you imagine? You're young, ambitious, and suddenly you're hanging out with Man Ray, Picasso, Miro.
Wow, what a time and place to be an artist.
Right, like the epicenter of surrealism. Everything's new and exciting, and people are really pushing boundaries in art, especially Man Ray with his rayographs. He was redefining what photography could even be.
Totally. And for someone like Lee, who was so hungry for new experiences and unafraid to experiment, it's the perfect environment.
And it's crazy how her photography career actually starts. She's in Rome, stuck drawing buckles and bows for fashion designs.
Oh, God, that sounds so boring.
I know, right?
Yeah.
Soul-crushing for someone like her. And so she picks up a folding Kodak, starts messing around, and boom, the spark is lit.
Like she was just meant to be a photographer.
Penrose really emphasizes how that one little moment set her on this amazing path.
It makes you think about how those seemingly random things can lead to something you're truly passionate about. You just have to be open to trying new things, right?
Yes, exactly. Now, you can't talk about Lee Miller without talking about Man Ray. Their first encounter is straight out of a movie. She literally steps in front of his car.
Talk about a bold move.
And that meeting kicks off this super intense, passionate relationship.
Passionate and often messy, right? From what I read.
Oh, definitely. But beyond the drama, Penrose really highlights how important their artistic collaboration was. They shared credit for their work. Which is not common back then. And Man Ray trusted Lee with some pretty major assignments.
That shows a lot of respect for her talent. She wasn't just his muse,
Right. He recognized she was a talented photographer in her own right. And it's not just Man Ray either. She's modeling for Vogue, working with Hoening and Wayne, one of the big names in fashion photography. It's like she's getting this masterclass in lighting and composition.
She's soaking it all up, learning from the best and developing her own style.
And then there's that story about how they discover solarization. It was an accident? A mistake in the darkroom?
Wait, I think I read about that. Didn't she say something about a bug crawling on her foot?
Yeah. She turns on the light, exposes the film, and most people would have just chucked it. But not Lee.
And that ruined image becomes this, signature technique for them.
Exactly. And they call it solarization. It gives photos this really surreal, almost otherworldly look.
It's perfect for them. Like they stumbled onto this magic trick by breaking the rules.
Right, and all of that experimentation, it leads to her success.
Yeah.
She opens her own portrait studio in Paris,
Yeah.
photographing everyone from royalty to children to a pet lizard.
A pet lizard.
Yeah, it just shows how incredibly versatile she was as a photographer. She could capture anything, you know.
She really had a knack for connecting with her subjects no matter who they were.
And then, out of nowhere, she marries Aziz Eloui Bey. It seems so impulsive, especially since her family had no idea who he was.
It's that impulsiveness again, right? Like she always needs to shake things up.
It makes you wonder, was she running towards something or away from something?
Yeah, good question.
It's a question that keeps coming up as we go deeper into her life. And with this marriage, she leaves the Parisian art scene and enters this whole different world. Penrose includes these letters from Aziz to Lee's parents, full of these charming details about life in Cairo floods, mosquitoes, these crazy lunches that turn into late-night card games.
Wow, that's a far cry from the avant-garde scene in Paris.
It really is. So the question is, did she find what she was looking for in this more normal life?
I guess we'll have to keep digging to find out. It's such a shift, from that Parisian life to Cairo. But like you said, she couldn't stay away from her art forever.
Right, it's like this pull she can't resist.
Yeah.
A trip to Jerusalem sparks that love for photography again, and soon enough, she's got a studio in Cairo.
I love that. Like she's taking back her power, stepping out from behind her husband and rediscovering herself.
And rediscovering herself through some wild adventures, too. Penrose writes about these desert trips where they'd swap water for martinis, running into snake charmers, even being on set for Jean Cocteau's film, The Blood of a Poet. It's almost surreal.
Well, that's fitting, isn't it? Given her connection to surrealism, it's like she's constantly seeking out those unexpected moments, pushing boundaries.
Yeah, like her life was art. But even with all that excitement, things weren't so picture perfect with her marriage.
There are these letters she wrote to Aziz, so raw and honest, especially one from Beirut, where she's wrestling with needing security but also craving freedom.
She even writes that she wants to be completely absorbed in some work or in a man I love. Like she's searching for fulfillment, something more.
It's a powerful statement, right? You can feel her yearning.
And then, as if on cue, she reconnects with Roland Penrose.
Oh yeah, the surrealist guy. It's interesting how she keeps ending up with these artistic types, always pushing the limits, just like her.
It's a pattern, for sure. And their romance, it's a whirlwind. Picasso exhibits, sailing mishaps, Stonehenge. It's like a movie montage.
Sounds like they packed a lifetime into a few months.
And then, boom, World War II hits, and Lee's suddenly on the front lines. Not as a soldier, but as a correspondent for Vogue.
Wow, what a change. From fashion to documenting the horrors of war. I mean, the Blitz, the liberation of Paris, Dachau, Buchenwald.
Talk about range, right?
Yeah.
She goes from capturing the beauty of fashion to the absolute horrors of humanity.
It's almost too much to comprehend, seeing those images side by side.
And the way she captures it all, it's just striking. The juxtaposition of those fashion photos with images of war and suffering, it's really powerful.
It makes you think about the full spectrum of human experience, doesn't it? The beauty and the ugliness, the joy and the pain.
It's like she's holding up a mirror to the world.
Yeah.
And you can tell that the war really impacted her deeply. When it ends, she has a hard time adjusting through. Penrose describes her as struggling with depression.
It's completely understandable after everything she witnessed, that trauma. It's no wonder she had a hard time going back to normal life.
And then she becomes a mother, which of course Lee does her own way.
That shopping list she made for the maternity home, it's hilarious. Smoked trout, caviar, a nappy laundry service.
So Lee, right, even in motherhood, she's got her own style.
I think it goes deeper than that. It's like she's holding on to her sense of self, her individuality, even in this new role.
And that need to create her own space leads her and Roland to Farley Farm.
Which turns into this incredible hub for artists and intellectuals, Picasso Man Ray, Henry Moore. It's like this constant flow of creativity and ideas.
And in the midst of all that, Lee steps back from photography and becomes a chef, like a renowned chef.
It's another transformation. Was it something she chose? Or was it because of the male-dominated art world back then? Or was it her way of coping with those winged serpents, those shadows from her past?
It's a question that lingers as we move into the later years of her life, a life that had so much light and so much darkness. It's fascinating how even with this idyllic life at Farley Farm, those winged serpents, those shadows from her past, they're still there.
It makes you think about how much our early experiences shape us. And can we ever really escape them?
That's a great question. And I think what's so powerful about Penrose's book is that he's so honest about his mother. He doesn't shy away from the tough stuff. He shows us her brilliance and her struggles.
It makes her real, Not some perfect figure, but a complex human being.
Exactly. And that's what makes her story so relatable. You see it in her letters, her moments of doubt, depression.
Yeah, but even in those dark moments, there's this resilience, this spark that keeps coming through.
Like she refuses to be defined by those shadows. And it makes that transition from photography to cooking even more interesting. Was it a way to cope? Or was it a conscious decision to explore something new?
It could be both, right? Like she needed a new outlet, a new way to connect with the world, and cooking with all the senses involved, the way it brings people together, maybe it provided that for her.
And you see that same artistic touch in her cooking too? Penrose even includes some of her recipes, and they're not simple stuff. We're talking elaborate dishes, complex flavors, like something out of a fancy restaurant.
It's like she brought that same passion and creativity from photography into the kitchen.
And it makes you wonder, was cooking just another form of art for Lee?
Maybe it was. And it makes me think about how we try to label people, put them in boxes. But Lee, she was a model, a muse, a photographer, a war correspondent, a wife, a mother, a cook.
She was all those things and more.
Exactly. She defies categorization. And that's what's so inspiring about her. It's like she was always evolving, always exploring different parts of herself.
It's a powerful message, especially today when there's so much pressure to fit in to be one thing.
Totally. Lee's story tells us it's okay to break the mold, to be messy and complicated and completely unique.
It's about forging your own path.
Yeah.
And that's what makes this deep dive into Lee Miller's life so impactful. It's not just about learning about a fascinating person. It's about discovering something within ourselves.
It's about connecting with those hopes and struggles that we all share. That desire to live a life that's true to ourselves.
And Lee Miller, with all her complexities and contradictions, she really embodies that. She reminds us to embrace life on our own terms, to push boundaries, to create, to love, to fight for what we believe in, and to never give up on ourselves.
Beautifully put. It's a story that sticks with you, It makes you want to go out and live life to the fullest. Embrace your own journey and never be afraid to be different.
And that's what makes these deep dives so rewarding. It's not just about learning about someone else, it's about learning about ourselves too.
And sometimes the most incredible stories are the ones that don't fit neatly into any category. They challenge us, they expand our understanding of what's possible, and they leave us feeling inspired.
Well said. And that wraps up our deep dive into the extraordinary life of Lee Miller. We hope you enjoyed it. And if you're looking for more insightful conversations and fascinating stories, be sure to subscribe to our channel on Spotify, Amazon Music, and Apple Podcasts. Until next time, keep revising and resubmitting your own stories.